I want to thank the Dean. I'd like to thank Hans and Marius, wherever you are, for those wonderful remarks. It's wonderful to see a nice audience because the first time I ever spoke, I just had received my PhD. I had only one person in the audience who had traveled far. So I decided to speak because he came. And when I was finished, I said, in fact, he applauded. And I said, thank you for being here, but I have to leave now. He says, he said to me, you can't go. I said, why not? He says, I'm the next speaker. So, is there another next speaker? Incidentally, while I've been thinking that I haven't been here, Christian Putzer told me I was here. I was here in 1998, and you were my sponsor in Vienna and Innsbruck. And that's why, as I walked through the wonderful castle, the museum, where I saw the statues of the historical figures, I said, where did I see it before? And it was here. So I've been to Innsbruck before. It's wonderful. Let me tell you what I'd like to do. I'd like to talk about why there is such a thing as marketing and give you a historical perspective. Let me start this way. I'm going to skip that. I'll start with this slide. Now, what have we got here? We have the biblical narrative. We have here the first consumer in the world. That's Adam. Because he was going to get an apple and consume it. We also have the first salesperson. But who was it? Who was the first salesperson? The snake, right. You were supposed to say Eve. Eve may have been the marketer or whatever you want to call it, but the snake got the idea and used persuasion to get Eve to give Adam an apple. So selling is one of the oldest things that have happened in human history. Salespeople and so on. And then I want to talk to you about the father of marketing, Aristotle. Now, is that a crazy remark or isn't it? That Aristotle would have anything to do with marketing? Well, first of all, he was the Google of the age. He was Google. Aristotle knew everything. He wrote on politics, he wrote on economics, on science, on drama, on rhetoric, and you name it. And when it comes to rhetoric is the art of using certain tools to persuade someone to do something. Persuasion. In fact, he had quite a good account of what it takes, how your own character can be a persuasive factor. We now call it source credibility, but whatever. So I urge you to read back into Aristotle if you want to become a good marketer. But that's not the point. There's a lot of antecedents to marketing, and I've listed some of them. For example, the French will often say that they invented the department store, 1845. But they didn't. It was the Japanese. The very first department store was the Mitsui department store in 1600 and so on. And frankly, it's still around. That's one of those exceptional companies that is still alive, that has gone through recessions and wars and everything, and Mitsui is still around. The interesting point there is a study was done called Living Companies to find out what's common to companies that last more than 100 years. And the way you find out is you choose the companies that have been long-lasting. And Mr. DeGoose, who worked for the Shell Oil Company, came up with some very interesting things that are characteristic of a company that lasts a long time. But we won't get into that now. You have other statistics there about the time of the first ad appearing in a newspaper and the first branding of a soap and the first branding and the first packaging. So the question is, when did marketing start? So I went to a dictionary that was done in 1900 to look up the word marketing, an English dictionary. It was not in the dictionary. So marketing was not a word in anyone's vocabulary in 1900. I then looked at a dictionary published in 1910, and the word was there. So really, marketing is about 100 years old. Not the word market. The word market goes way back, not only to the Middle Ages, but probably the agora in Greece, ancient Greece, in Athens. But marketing, why did it come about? We always had salespeople. Why do we need marketing? So this is something we have to ponder. It turns out that markets and trade were omnipresent, always present. But some economists decided they were very unhappy with classical marketing theory, economic theory, because the economists only talk about two things. One is called demand, the other is called supply, and that leads to the third thing, which is price. As if price is the only thing that shapes demand. If you look at the economics literature, you will not see much reference to advertising, which I think shapes demand, sales force, which shapes demand, public relations, which shape demand. And so a couple of disillusioned economists, called really institutional economists, decided to talk about the real world, and the first books on marketing were written between 1900 and 1910. And I want to show you pictures of some of the people who shaped marketing into what it is today. These are I wanted to get a person who represents the beginning of marketing research, a person who would represent great advertising, a person who would represent a great public relations idea. So I don't think you recognize any of these people except one, possibly. And first of all, you're far away, so you may not see the faces well enough. But some of you may recognize this fellow. Who? No. Dale Carnegie. Do you know the name Dale Carnegie? Did you ever read a book called How to Win Friends and Influence People? So let me fill in the rest. And let me say that the top person there, and that's not in order, the one in top in the order, is the person who was the first to go into the motives for buying anything. He was an expert at motivational psychology. And his name was Ernest Dichter. And Ernest Dichter, believe it or not, came from Vienna, I believe. Claims that he studied under Freud. And Ernest Dichter made a wonderful practice in the New York area of helping any company that couldn't sell its product and explaining to them what they could do to actually get some attention, interest, desire, and action. He would say, well, the reason people don't like prunes is prunes are sort of a wrinkled fruit, and people don't want to think of aging, so they're not attracted to. He comes up all the time with the most interesting, if not bizarre, explanations of why we resist a product and so on. Gets a nice fee from the company in telling them what they might do. For example, make a happy prune. Take the wrinkles out, and so on and so forth. So he's exemplary. And now we also call him a head shrinker because he gets into the head of people to explain what's going on. The next fella is Alfred Politz, who is not a head shrinker, but we call him a nose counter. He counts noses because his brand of research is survey research. So Alfred Politz was one of the leaders in trying to measure people demographically, how many men, women, educational levels, and so on and so forth. Then the third person we have is Julius Rosenwald, who built the famous company called Sears, one of the most successful chain stores and department stores in the world. And the next person is Lester Wunderman. I think Lester's from European, basically, and I chose his face because he did so much for direct marketing. Direct marketing, that is the mail you receive offering you something, the catalogs you receive. Lester's brilliant at that and has so many stories to tell. And if you're interested in direct marketing, please read his book called Being Direct. It's his life story. I had to choose someone who would represent the advertising world, and that was very hard because there are some geniuses in advertising. And I chose, of course, David Ogilvy, who wrote, by the way, the title of my own talk is Confessions of a Marketer, and he wrote a book called The Confessions of an Advertising Man, I guess. And I could have tried Birnbach. There were other people that were brilliant at advertising, but that was the representative. Stanley Marcus. There's a company in the United States that sells wonderful clothes and shoes and so on called Neiman Marcus. So that's the Stanley Marcus. Stanley had this ability. He could go into any retail store, and immediately tell them what they need to do to make it really work better. It has to do with aisle size. It has to do with merchandising, the assortments, the look of the atmospherics, and so on and so forth. So Stanley had that gift of retailing. Then we had someone who brought public relations into being, really. And Ernest Bernays, those of you who may be in PR, public relations, should read some of his early work on how to persuade the public about some cause or some interesting issue. And then we come to Dale Carnegie. Okay, that's a little history of some great contributors to our knowledge. But why did companies start a marketing department when they always had a sales force? 3 reasons. The first is that salesmen will not like to do consumer research on a broad scientific basis. I mean, you can't ask a salesman to start studying all that because the salesperson wants to be selling something to some customer, not doing consumer research. That was one impulse. But we also wanted to help the salesperson in a second way. The salesperson needs help knowing who to go to. In other words, the old idea was the salesman would watch the factories and see which ones had smoke coming out, and that was a sign that they're alive and well, and therefore you better knock on the door and say you got a machine, a lathe or something to sell them. But wouldn't it be better if someone could produce a list of what we call hot prospects, people ready to buy, people with already an interest? So we needed some research that would help that function. And the third thing we needed was salesmen don't want to make brochures. They don't want to make ads. They're not trained to do that. We need people who are trained in communication. And so we created basically a set of outsiders who we had to sort of draw in. And initially, these 3 people were in the sales department. They were engaged by the vice president of sales to make selling more efficient. But what happened over time was this. Namely, those 3 people and some others were separated into a department that we constantly must remind these marketers that basically their job is to help the sales force sell better. That basically their first customer, the first customer of marketing is not the one outside but the sales force. Because if the sales force is not convinced that they're getting any help from the marketing department, they will bypass the marketing plan. The first job is to write a marketing plan that pleases the sales force. Otherwise, you will be sabotaged by the sales force. So that really means include salespeople in forming the marketing plan. By the way, I was surprised myself at the bad relationships that exist in many companies between sales and marketing. Because if those two groups are not partners, then the company's going to fail too. And here's what comes up. Sometimes the sales force says, the marketing department, I don't like it. They create ads that nobody cares about. I'd rather take their budget and hire 2 more salespeople. I'd rather have feet on the street than some ads that the customers don't even remember seeing or like. And the quotas, say the salesmen. Where do they get those silly quotas? I can't sell 100 units a month. There's just not a market for 100 units a month. They're stretching us too far. So when I realized that, I wrote an article in the Harvard Business Review called Ending the War Between Sales and Marketing. It's another article if I talk about ending the war between the finance department and marketing, or marketing and the manufacturing group, and so on. So, we've got to break down these silos and have collaborative planning, collaborative work. But in any case, you see that there's a lot of positions in a marketing department. There are segment managers, there's category managers, there are price experts. Normally, the marketing department basically started with 1 P. We need communications. Let's hire some people who can be very good at communications. But now it's become a bigger thing. A lot of a marketing group, its profile, depends on what the CEO thinks marketing is. Most CEOs never studied marketing. Most CEOs don't like marketing because it's a cost and they can't measure results. Yes, we try. We try to find out if the marketing people increased awareness, increased favorable attitudes, increased sales, but essentially the shape of the marketing group depends on the CEO's vision of what he wants from the marketers. So I distinguish between a 1P CEO. By the way, the CEO himself or herself will be an engineer in half the cases, or will be a lawyer, or will be an accountant. But it's the CEO who says, I don't like marketing, but I need someone to do some advertising. So that's a 1P. It's better if you work for a company where the CEO says, I think we better cover 4 Ps. Every plan should talk about the product and its features and quality, talk about the price we should charge for it, talk about the channels, the channels of distribution we're going to use, and also about the promotion. So it's better to work for that kind of CEO because you're going to be a brand manager and you're going to make a plan, and it has 4 Ps. It's even better to work for the STP type of CEO who says, wait, how can you write a plan until we decide what target markets, what segments we want to actually sell to? Because any market is made up of a lot of different groups. So that CEO is a great guy or gal and basically says, let's decide what markets we could actually win and then have a plan for each of those segments. The best kind of marketer is the kind I met at Procter & Gamble. The CEO's name was A.G. Lafley, who just recently retired. And he says of himself, I'm an ME marketer or CEO. What do you mean? He says, well, marketing is everything. M-E, marketing is everything. Namely, the customer is everything. That's what he's saying. Everyone, look, even General Electric used to do this. When you pick up your pay, it's in an envelope. It's maybe a check or something. And then along with that is a little note, brought to you by the customer. In other words, GE is not paying you. The only reason there's a check in your envelope is there's some customer who thought enough of us to buy our products. So we got to get that into the mindset of people. I don't want to go into all the things that a marketer, by the way, we used to call the head of marketing the vice president of marketing in my country. Now we have raised the level of that person. We call that person the chief marketing officer. Therefore, he or she sits with the chief financial officer when there's big planning at the senior level, the chief information officer, the chief technology officer, and so on. That's good. And if any of you become a chief marketing officer, I can talk about 6 things that you ought to be good at doing. But with this advice, if you're hired, don't do all 6 things, because there will be no impact that would be measurable by spreading yourself so thin over so many chores. Figure out the 2 things that will show value within 1 year so you're not fired. In other words, figure out maybe if I could get a good insight, the word we now are in love with, customer insight, a new way to look at the market. If I can get a customer insight that will resegment the market and we make a lot of money, I'll last 2 years. There's other things to do, but the average chief marketing officer lasts about 2 years. It's either that the CEO is impatient or whatever that new CMO, chief marketing officer, could do, he or she has done it, and now I don't need the position, or I'm gonna whatever. It's a complicated thing. However, it turns out that there are CMOs who've been running marketing for 8 years. For example, Beth Comstock at General Electric has been there 8 years, and she's a force behind the success of GE. One of the forces behind the success of GE. So I don't want any of you to give up your ambition to be a chief marketing officer based on the fact that the average one lasts 2 years. But I thought I would mention that. The interesting thing about marketing is that it only dealt with goods and services until we started to broaden it. And in broadening marketing, it's a movement itself called the broadening of marketing. The top level shows commercial marketing, which we know about that. And as Marius mentioned, there's other forms. Place marketing. And let me tell you a little story. I've written a book on every one of these types of marketing. And the book, Marketing Places, I'll tell you a little story. I was in Spain, in Bilbao, Spain. Now, maybe you don't know where Bilbao is because everyone knows where Madrid is and Barcelona. But if you go to Bilbao, you'll be impressed with the fact that it was quite a city at one time. It's got great architecture and so on, but no one was ever visiting Bilbao. So I was at a meeting. They had called me to give a talk, and we had about 1,000 people at the meeting. And I said, look, it's so simple. You guys have to have some attraction. You got to build an Eiffel Tower. But don't build Eiffel Tower. France owns that. That's Paris already. But there has to be a reason to come and see the city. I said, you need a museum or something, something special. Well, what happened shortly thereafter, those people gathered and they formed committees and they talked about, yes, we don't have any attraction. We just have some real estate and buildings. And they hired Frank Gehry, the great architect, who builds a museum that is worth more than what's inside of it. I mean, you don't have to go there for what's inside. You want to go to the outside and walk around this crazy building. Do you know there were chartered flights from Japan, just straight from Japan to Bilbao and back to see this city. So a lot of what I do in place marketing, and I've worked with a lot of cities. I mean, we could work with Innsbruck too, but you don't need it. You've got your attractions. Maybe you don't want to attract any more people because you don't want over congestion and all the bads that go with being popular. Maybe you should put your wall around the city again and have people, if they have the right credentials, they can get in. But in any case, that's place marketing. Then there's person marketing. Let's call it the Lady Gaga phenomena, who has more followers than anyone in history, I guess. Certainly today. If I could get Lady Gaga to mention my product, wow, I'll pay her anything to say that she uses those shoes or that designer. She's a Gucci person. Gucci's wonderful, and that would work very well. But she has to be very careful not to commercialize her role. Once in a while, she'll mention some product that she's been taken with. But there is an agency called William Morris, which will turn a person into a star. In other words, create high visibility. There's no guarantee, but let's say there's a woman with a very good voice, very good, but there's a lot of women who can sing very well. But they say to her, a talent scout would say that, if you could only look more like, if you do your hair differently, if you wear different clothes, if we put you on this talk show and that talk show, they're treating her like a product. That's called product development. And product development is part of creating high visibility, and so on. So there's a lot there. Now, social marketing as a branch is more about causes. I named it social marketing, but I should have named it cause marketing. How to help all of us say no to hard drugs, say no to smoking, or don't overdrink, but exercise, eat the right food, don't litter. There's hundreds of causes. And why should marketing have anything to do with that? Well, because marketing consists of the tools that may not only motivate or demotivate, but also sets the frame and the context for maybe changing behavior. So the social marketer's goal is to influence your behavior in a direction which is good for you. Now, that's a little presumptuous. Maybe we don't want people to go around and tell us what we should eat and this is nutritious, that's not nutritious, and so on. But right now there's about 2,000 social marketers, professional ones, around the world involved in causes. Now, I don't mean that Mother Teresa was a social marketer. She wasn't trained to be. Was a saintly person. But these are do-gooders who want to not work for money so much as to make a difference in the lives of people. So that's social marketing. Now I have to apologize for political marketing, because political marketing is almost embarrassing. I mean, I was very embarrassed when I saw the Republicans and their lineup quacking at each other and actually ending up destroying each other, providing very good material for the Democrats and so on. And I happen to be a fan of Obama very much, and I'm so glad he's in control again. But the last thing I might say is fundraising is really a type of marketing. How do you get a donor to give up something and not get something back? How does the dean get some good support, by actually forming a relationship? It is a two-way kind of thing. People like to be part of something else. They support the museum, they support the theater, so it's not a one-way exchange. It sounds like the donor is giving something but getting nothing. When done right, fundraising is a marketing exchange process. All right, let me go on and say all of us are marketers. You may say that's kind of a broad statement, but have you ever been in situations like this? Have you ever competed for a job with against other candidates, and you did everything when you would appear to make a good, strong impression about why you're such a good candidate for the job. Did you ever compete for an apartment where apartments were scarce and you want to be the one to be able to? Did you ever court a person of the opposite sex where you wanted to make that person your wife or husband or whatever? Well, we all are into impression making to some extent, managing our brand. Each one is a brand in one sense, in the sense that some other people who talk about you are talking about you in a way to describing what you're like. So you have a persona. You have a persona, whether it's a valid one or not. So basically, we're all pretty close to marketing behavior. What about the bad side of marketing? This is something we can't deny, that there are some real issues. We intrude, we interrupt, we exaggerate. Sometimes we are deceptive in our practices. Hard selling, pressure selling, buy now, pay later, probably is the cause of the financial collapse. Oh, you want a home? No money down? Fine. Everyone should have a home. And then you do that, and then he loses his job, can't pay anything back, and foreclosed. So that's an excessive kind of arrangement. Planned obsolescence. Now, I don't know. I used to hate planned obsolescence because you buy something and you want it to be with you. Yet, I have the 4S iPhone. This is the one that I can talk to Siri. Do you know Siri, the woman who knows everything? You press the button, you say, what's the population of Innsbruck? And it's right there. By the way, the guy who invented Siri gave us a talk in Chicago at Northwestern a week ago, and said Siri will get better and better and become your secretary. Even when you don't ask her a question, she will ring you saying, you remember your appointment, don't you, this Tuesday? And did you brush your teeth today? And so on and so forth. So he's got some big plans for Siri. But you know what? I'm probably going to trade this in for the S5, for the 5, the iPhone 5 that just came out. It's a little thinner, a little faster. I shouldn't do it. This is about the latest you can get, except for 5. So I'm living with the idea when I get back to Chicago, I'm going to buy the 5. So is that planned obsolescence? Do I feel badly about it? No, I don't. I really want phones to get better and better and be more and more things. Okay, now this idea that there are parts of marketing that we don't like has been whipped up by some critics, and I understand them. Do you recognize any of these people, if you can see them on this scale? They have been big critics of marketing, and I don't blame them. Do you recognize the first person? That's Ralph Nader. Ralph Nader said that our cars are unsafe. Not all cars, but that Ford Motor should stop making that awful car that's where the gas tank might explode on you, and so on. So let me show you that the major critics of marketing have been Ralph Nader, an activist, and his book was Unsafe at Any Speed. Rachel Carson, it shouldn't be Carlson, it's Carson actually, wonderful naturalist woman who wrote the book Silent Spring and told us that the water is polluted with pesticides and chemicals. And by the way, we had a practice of a lot of companies, they just got rid of bad things in our water supply. So in a sense, Rachel Carson was the starting point of environmentalism. Before we had a lot of environmental organizations, she created an environmental consciousness for us. Then you have Vance Packard, a business critic, who wrote the book The Hidden Persuaders and made it sound like even when we're in a movie theater and we get hungry for some popcorn, there's a little blinking thing, you don't quite see it, but it's making you want to go and get popcorn, which what he called subliminal advertising. and we've never had any evidence of subliminal, but still he made the case that hidden persuaders to get you to buy things. Then John Kenneth Galbraith was a tremendous person. In many ways, he was the ambassador to India. He was a great economist. But he wrote The Affluent Society, which made the point that we have poverty among affluents. That is to say, the private sector treats us well. They create all kinds of deodorants for us and whatever else we might want, okay? But the public sector is neglected. So the park is dirty, it's unsafe. There must be a role for government to make sure that the public sector is well treated. And this is a big issue in the United States. It's not an issue here. You pay higher taxes and you get a good environment. But the last election is all about smaller government. Thank God they lost because we need to have better bridges, we need better roads, we need better airports. So Galbraith. Then Naomi Klein is the real person who is digging into us. She wrote a book called No Logo, which is to say, don't buy brands. Just buy the cheapest thing that calls itself a banana. It doesn't have to be Chiquita banana. I mean, Chiquita banana is like some other banana. So she has documented how much we try to differentiate a non-differentiable kind of product, that it's a skill, and she doesn't like it. And then the latest person to come along is Michael Sandel, What Money Can't Buy, The Moral Limits of Marketing. There's a lot of stories. He's very upset that in California, a person who's a prisoner can get a better cell by paying a little more money. Can be shifted from a small cell to one with more or less plush accommodations. In other words, to earn money, the prison system has now allowed the purchase of a better cell with a computer in it and so on and so forth. He is very upset with what he calls the skyboxification of America. Skyboxification, what a word. Do you know what a skybox is? See, in the old days when you would go to a baseball game, you would sit next to a very wealthy person. You wouldn't know if he is or not, a poor person. You'd all stand in line for hot dogs. It was wonderful. Everyone was enjoying the game. Now, up there are the rich people. They're having filet mignon. There's no line for them. And we peasants are sitting down here. And he says this kind of separation of the classes is not good for America. You might want to read his book. He is mostly famous for a set of lectures at Harvard on justice. If you're interested in a lot of teasers about what would you do in that situation to do the right thing. What is the right thing to do in that situation? And he has many situations, and he'll have 500 people in the class, and he remembers that what you said, the names, and he brings it all to, it's an epiphany to experience him doing that. Okay, so moving on, with practically my last slide, but I want to show you who are the world's best marketers, some of the world's best marketers. And we're not talking about academic marketers, we're talking about CEOs largely. Do you recognize any of them? Sure. But you didn't recognize him probably. When you go to an IKEA, the furniture store, it's Ingmar Kamprad who really built that wonderful way to bring down the cost of furniture and to make it a destination. I mean, I go to, why I go to IKEA? I go there to have a good meal. I get Swedish meatballs, and they must be subsidized or something. And they have a daycare center, by the way, because children aren't going to be happy walking through all that furniture. So you leave them there and take a deposit slip, make sure they hope you come back for your child, and so on. But everything was thought through about the decision path, the journey to buying furniture, and how to make that journey very, very comfortable. So we have Richard Branson, who's the most fantastic CEO. Who would ever think you can take a word and always add new businesses using the word virgin? You know what I mean? You could have Virgin Railroad, Virgin Cell Phones, Virgin Airlines, and so on and so forth. There's another guy who's cashing in on that too. I forget his name. He's a Greek fellow. And easy this, easy that. He owns the word easy, so to speak. Easy planes, easy hotels. He's going to move that word into a lot of categories. Walt Disney, what a genius in creating the worlds that he has created, which are many worlds. It's not just Disneyland. It's, companies go to Disney to learn how to really give service and to be creative. To get creative training, you go to Disney. Then you've got Herb Kelleher, who was one of the first to introduce the whole idea of low-cost flying, point-to-point flying, and marvelous person there. And then Anita Roddick, first time a shop, in this case it was called the Body Shop, also wants us to save the whales, and as we're in that store, make sure you're giving some money to the homeless. And none of this, use my skin lotion and you will be beautiful and men will fall at your feet and all that. None of that nonsense. She hated marketing. And the Body Shop was about giving you some good skin care lotions made by villages that she supported and so on and so forth. And of course you know the story of Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, and one more, Jeff Bezos, whose picture we should also include, who I think is one of the most customer-oriented, caring people. Amazon is so brilliant. What he's thought of, he's not only thought of collecting, having people write about the book they read and telling you whether they like it or not, but let's say I want to give a gift to someone, you could write down on Amazon what kind of gift you want people to give you. And I can look your name up, and then I see that you're interested in this or that. But the big thing is, who is he targeting now? Remember, he's not only selling books. What else can you buy from Amazon? You name it. Clothes, electronics. So who is he going after? Walmart. The big battle now is going to be Walmart versus online, Amazon. Amazon is online Walmart. So it's going to be interesting. So these are some of the best thinkers in marketing. There is a model I use in my book, Marketing 3.0, where I say to a company, you can make money with any of those columns, but try to move from column 1 to column 2 to column 3. Namely, every company should be clear about its mission, its vision, and its values. So column 1 is called a 1.0 company, and it's okay. They want to deliver satisfaction. They want to make a profit. They want to be better. Our product is better than the competitors. That's sort of a functional view of products. The second Marketing 2.0 says, wait, we've got to touch people in their hearts, not just in their minds. It's one thing to say that this detergent makes clothes cleaner, but why don't you show a baby in the ad? And we love babies and children and so on. Emotionalize it. And today in a morning discussion, someone brought up an interesting point I hadn't thought of. Too many ads are emotional now. Every ad I turn to, she said, has got emotion already. In other words, we succeeded in selling the idea that the way to touch a customer is through emotions. But and help people realize their aspirations and return back again and again to buy from you and show how you're different. The thing that's new about the picture is 3.0. And it raises the question, should companies also appeal to our spirit, to our soul? Should they not only give us a good offer and product and or service, but also touch us because they care? They care about the planet. They care about people. In other words, this is sometimes called practicing the triple bottom line. That these companies doing that, they're saying they want to be good at profits, of course, but also people they hire, customers, and they also want to protect the planet. So one can say a lot about such companies, and in fact, I have a lot of these diagrams. This happens to be the S.C. Johnson Company, which has products shown in the upper left, but as you read the boxes, you see they care. They care about the bottom of the pyramid. They care about poor people. They adjust their products to be affordable to people in poor circumstances and so on. A book I like very much is called Firms of Endearment, which is a fancy word which is really saying companies that we love. And an interesting thing happened. These three researchers went around asking people in the United States, are there any companies that you love or would miss? By the way, this could be done here in Austria. It would be interesting. Are there any you probably will mention a Swarovski, of course. You should be proud of that kind of firm. It's a tremendous firm. But what else would you name? Well, some of you would name some of those that Americans named, and some of those companies are not well known to you possibly. But the interesting question arises, two questions. First, are these companies more profitable? Just because they're loved, people love them, doesn't mean they're more profitable. And the answer is yes. Over a 10-year period, substantially more profitable than the competitors have been. The next question is there something common to all these 25 companies that we can learn from? And the answer is yes. Without going into this, all of these companies seem to operate, they want to be good to the stakeholders, not just the shareholder. In other words, they want to have a very good supplier relationships with suppliers, with the distributors, with the employees, with anyone who has a stake in the business. They build teamwork. They build collaboration. But the interesting one is the last point. The marketing costs of these 25 companies is less than the marketing cost of their competitors. In fact, you might have thought they're famous because they spend more on marketing. That is, of course, we see their name more often. No, that's not true. They don't spend as much on marketing, so who's doing the marketing? And it's obvious. You are. You like the company so much that on the internet you tell your friend you try that brand and that's great. So the real trick of a company is to have the customers love you enough to talk about you. With the internet, I would say that we may reach a point where there will be no bad companies in an economy. And the reason is the transparency now that every company is very visible and in the limelight. And when it's a bad company, word gets out and we avoid it. So you got to be a pretty good company and not have a lot of critics. You can't exaggerate the quality of your product without some people starting to tell others they're overcharging, they don't have that quality. You've got to be authentic. Hence the word that's increasingly being used is a company authentic, real, and so on. By the way, that's also has an equivalent when it comes to asking whether a company is really serious about the planet. Because when they aren't, and they're just doing little things that look good, then we call it greenwashing. They're just greenwashing. They're not very serious. They're not very authentic. So I'm going to end now with two books that you might want to read because they are raising questions that are of concern to all of us, beyond marketing. One is the book by Jeremy Rifkin, written about 8 years ago, End of Work. Will we be able to create enough jobs around the world for people who want jobs? We know that Spain has something like 25% unemployment. Hopefully it's temporary. Even in Italy, where I just came from, it's a 10% unemployment, but it's 30% of young people unemployed. Can we create enough jobs? And whose job is it to create jobs? You might say, well, the job creators. I want to make the point that it's marketing's job to create jobs. You thought marketing's job is to sell products. Yes, but when you can sell products, someone has to make them. So marketing is the salvation of the problem. It has the answer to the problem, which is good and bad. Namely, marketing's job is to make you buy, and buy, because that's equivalent to jobs, jobs, and jobs. No one buys, no jobs. The unfortunate connection that has been lost is this. Yes, you can make a lot of things without workers today, and that's called automation. So tomorrow's factory is going to be with two people who breathe. One is a worker and the other is a dog. And the worker is supposed to watch the buttons and everything, and the dog is to wake up the worker if he falls asleep. And that's unfortunate in a sense because that new thing happening means that we may not be able to create enough jobs. The other thing I want you to look at is this new book, The Death of Demand. I don't feel that. I feel we want a lot of things. But he is making a case that we're approaching demand saturation. Is he talking about people with a lot of money, or is he talking about, he can't be talking about poor people. Poor people have lots of things they need and want. So, again, marketing comes up there too. And he raises the question, as China increases its middle class, will traffic be able to move in Beijing? Because everyone wants a car of their own. And the question is, how are you going to keep the planet and the air and other things? Dale, you came back recently from Beijing, was that?
Delhi.
Which city?
Delhi.
Oh, Delhi. Oh, yes, it was Delhi. We had a conversation, and you said you couldn't see across the street because of the pollution level. So basically, there's some very interesting questions with respect to marketing and its role. I think marketing shapes our society. Not that it's intending to, but it delivers. I would go so far as to say that marketing has created the middle class. The idea of a middle class is a marketing idea. If you mean by that, having a home, having some land, and so on. The irony is that people who have a home with a little grass and so on, who bought that home and situation so they could have their own estate, so to speak, they spend less than 6% of their time out on the grass, which was the dream. The dream was, we can barbecue, we could have parties. And of the 6%, 5% is mowing your own land. That's what you worked so hard, so that you can push a lawnmower and be an owner. Okay. So we have a lot of questions to raise about marketing, and I leave them for you to think about. Thank you very much.